What's up, you guys? Steven with Magic Metal Money. We got part 2 of Innistrad Midnight Hunt previews today, and we're starting off with a nice spooky scary one, Ominous Roost. 3 mana enchantment, 2 generic, 1 blue. When Ominous Roost enters the battlefield, or whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, create a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying, and this creature can only block creatures with flying. This card looks really good in draft. I just think that it's going to be a really powerful late game engine, especially when you consider not only flashback, but also disturb mechanic being in the format. I think that you're just going to have an army of flyers. So far, the disturb cards we've seen come back as flying spirits, and now every time you do that, not only are you getting the disturbed body itself, you're getting an additional 1/1. I think this is a really powerful late game engine if you have enough cards to support it in draft. Foul Play, sorcery, 1 black, 1 generic, destroy target creature with power 2 or less, investigate. This looks like a great card, again in limited. This doesn't look like something you're going to play very often in standard, though maybe. I mean, the fact that you're paying 2 mana and it's only a creature that has power 2 or less, you're definitely not going to get an mana advantage basically ever on this thing. So you might be trading 2 for 2 mana wise, but then the fact that later down the road you can get your card back looks good. The more I think about it, depending on the standard environment, this could be a 1 or a 2 of in the right deck, the right mid-range type of deck when you're trying to just trade resources and get your 2 for 1s. I think it looks solid. Ancestral Mirror, this one is just so sweet. The art is absolutely amazing. It looks like there was a pentagram drawn on the ground. You can't see the full thing. Magic tries to get away from that, but you can still see some of it there. Artifact, 1 generic, 1 black, pay 1 generic, tap, pay 1 life, discard a card, draw a card, mill a card, then place a ritual counter on Ancestral Mirror. Then, if there are 3 or more ritual counters on it, remove them all and transform it, activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so just looking at this front side, clearly this is just an engine for a graveyard synergistic deck. It's a slow engine. It does cost a mana. You can only do it once each turn. It costs you a life. But the fact that you discard a card and mill a card, and then you replace the card you discarded by drawing a card, I think that looks great. You can obviously, the ideal is that you discard a card that has graveyard synergy and value, flashback, disturb, and then you mill over another card, and boom. You just got a ton of value for it. So definitely going to be slow and grindy, but in the right deck, this looks like a cool engine. And when it transforms, you get Inherited Demon, this big old scary guy. He's coming out of the mirror. He's coming at you. It's a 4/4 flyer, so a nice big body. 2, 1 black, exile target creature card from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Inherited Demon. Sure, you can obviously target your own graveyard when you have extra creatures milled over, but this is also really nice to have main deck graveyard hate. I think that's going to be really important. As standard rotates, the format's going to be so much smaller, and Innistrad Midnight Hunt is going to have a much bigger presence. It's also a fall set, presumably going to be very powerful from what we've seen so far. Definitely a lot of graveyard value, so having this extra value, main deckable graveyard hate is really important, and it's a big boy too. That's a big body. Geist Flame Reservoir, artifact, 2 generic, 1 red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Geist Flame Reservoir. Pay 1 generic, 1 red, tap, remove any number of charge counters from the reservoir. It deals that much damage to any target. Pay 1 red, 1 generic, tap, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Again, this just looks like a grindy type of card. Like, you're getting a lot of value this over time, and yes, you got to pay mana to shoot something, but the fact that it's any target, you can use that as a removal spell. I mean, it looks like there's going to be a lot of support in blue-red spells deck, and this is definitely going to be a very strong card. And, main deck, sideboard, who knows? It depends on how grindy you want to get, but the fact that it is versatile and that it can kill creatures, it can go to the face, and then also you can draw cards off of it, to me, that makes me feel like this is a main deckable card because it's just so versatile. Can't stay away. This thing, look at this art. It's cute. We got all these little kitty cats going around. We got 9 cats plus the spirit cat. I don't know what that one on the right's doing. Is it throwing up? Is it trying to eat it? Can't tell. Either way, we got a nice card here. We got for 1 white, 1 black, sorcery, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains if this creature would die, exile it instead. And then we have flashback for 5 mana. Unearth for 2 mana is still decent. Obviously, Unearth at 1 mana is really powerful because you can get a big mana advantage, but still you can get either equal for mana with bringing back a 2-drop, or obviously get a nice mana advantage by bringing it back a 3-drop. But then in the late game, just more value. Who doesn't love just grindy games? And that's what Standard is looking like it's going to be. Every card we've talked about so far, and a lot of cards we talked about yesterday, just looks like there's so much grind in them. Consuming Ooze, 3 generic, green, ooze creature. It's Power and tough is equal to the number of card types in your graveyard, and toughness is equal to that number plus 1. At the beginning of your end step, create a green ooze creature token with the same body. Prepare to lose to this mythic in limited. This looks absolutely bananas. If they don't kill this thing right on the spot, you're gonna have another big old creature, and then if this thing lasts 2 turns, game over. Like, it's just done. At that point, you have 3 huge bodies off of this. Presumably, it's gonna be at least a 3/4, if not a 4/5, and that's gonna be bonkers. For standard, you might see this make a splash. Doesn't look like a format defining staple to me. Rite of Harmony. I can't believe this card is being printed. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna overhype this, but it looks so powerful. 1 green, 1 white instant. Whenever a creature or enchantment enters the battlefield under your control this turn, draw a card, and it has flashback for 4 mana. Glimpse of Nature is an absolutely bonkers busted card, and Glimpse of Nature for 2 mana is still completely nuts. Not to mention this thing has flashback, but if you can play this thing and generate a ton of mana and then just have a bunch of creatures coming into the battlefield, also this works with enchantments, so you can see this going to be in some Enchantress deck. This just looks crazy. Like, I almost can't believe they printed this. Who knows if this will do anything in standard, I don't know, but in older formats, this looks like an absolute powerhouse. You see this going straight into modern. It's going to be very strong. Stuck in the Cemetery. Had to include this card because this looks like everyone's worst nightmare. Any cemetery looks terrifying, but this one in particular, no thank you, I don't want any part of this, and it does look like a good solid removal spell for limited. Flame Channeler, sign me up please. This card looks very good. Again, I do think this will see play in standard with that red-blue spells deck that looks like it's very supported. We got a 1 generic, 1 red, 2/2, so nice grizzly bear, human wizard. Whenever a spell you control deals damage, just deals damage, it doesn't have to be to a player, you transform it, then it's a 3/3, so it's just a bigger body, and whenever a spell you control deals damage, put a flame counter on Embodiment of Flame, and then you can pay 1 generic, remove a flame counter, not all of them, to exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. This looks very strong, and one more reason why I'm excited to brew an Is It Spells deck. Geeza, Glorious Resurrector. The promo art on this is so cool. It's just that black and white art is just so epic. I really like this card, and it looks very good. 2 generic, black, 4/4 body, so a nice big creature, human, legendary. If a creature an opponent control would die, exile it instead. Again, that main board hit, graveyard hate is going to be very important, I think, in standard. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Geeza, Glorious Resurrector onto the battlefield under your control. They gain Decayed. So they can't block, but when they attack, you'll sacrifice them at the end of combat. But who cares? You got these things for free from your opponent. Now, one thing to note is that when they die under your control, they will then go into your opponent's graveyard. So you're kind of in a weird squeeze here, because you do have main deck graveyard hate against creatures coming back from the graveyard with Disturb, but now you're also putting them back into their graveyard later, but maybe you've overwhelmed them and you're attacking with all their creatures, so they just die, so then it's not an issue. Dissipate, a nice cancel spell with exiling, which is obviously going to be very relevant with flashback and Disturb. Can't say that enough. This is going to be very strong in any control deck. Devoted Graphkeeper, this card looks very strong. It's a white-blue 2/1 human. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 2 cards, and then whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, tap target creature you don't control. It also has Disturb. So when you put 4 copies of this thing in your deck, they're going to feed off of each other, and one's going to benefit the other because you have one on the front side, one has died, you bring it back, and then you get the effect from the one that's still on the front side on the battlefield. This looks great, and then any type of value engine where you're flipping milling yourself, I think is going to be really important. The thing that throws me off here is the color combination of being Azorius, but we'll see if this fits and finds a home. Then on the back side, we got some really cool art with Departed Soul Keeper. Love this thing. It's the Disturb side, it's a 3/1 flyer, and it can block creatures with flying. Falcon Wrath Pit Fighter, we got a good one for all you red mages out here. A nice 1 red, 2/1 body, and then it has a nice upside. It's a vampire, and then you pay 1 and generic 1 red, discard a card, sacrifice a vampire, draw 2 cards, activate only if an opponent has lost life this turn. If we have a nice mono red aggressive deck in standard, this looks to be a great place for it to start. I mean, a nice 2-power creature on turn 1 is always solid. And then the fact that later in the game, you can convert dead cards into draw steps is really powerful. You draw that 5th land or that 4th land, depending on how aggressive your deck is, and it really isn't going to do anything for you. And you might even sacrifice itself to its own ability, because you just have to sacrifice a vampire. And so if it's a 2/1, it got its 4 points of damage in, great. Now it's obsolete because they have a big 2/5 blocker or something like that. Well, that's okay. Like, you can convert a land that you drew and this card that's already done a bunch of damage into 2 new cards. I do think this is very powerful. If there's going to be a shell for it, it will definitely be in the red aggressive deck. Kessig Naturalist, this card looks awesome. First of all, love the little wolf pup. It's very cute. Who doesn't like that? The buildings in the background are also really sweet. Anyway, getting to the card, a red-green 2/2, but whenever it attacks, you add red or green until in a turn you don't lose this mana at steps and phases. And it's daybound, and then when it transforms, it becomes a 3/3, and then it's a werewolf lord. Wolves and werewolves you control get +1/+1 with the same ability for mana. This card looks like Tovolar's best friend. This is going to be a great 2-drop in any Gruul deck, but especially a Gruul deck that can take advantage of having lots of wolves and werewolves. And again, you don't have to have a fully dedicated werewolf deck. Like, if you just have some wolves and werewolves, this bad boy is going to help you. It's going to be good because when it flips, it's going to pump you other creatures. But by itself, even without that, a 2/2 for 2 mana that when it attacks gives you mana is extremely powerful in a creature deck. So then on turn 3, not only did you get an attack and get some damage in, but then you also got to play a 4-drop. So you're getting ahead of curve. That's going to put a lot of pressure on your opponents. If you're excited about building a werewolf deck, make sure you subscribe and join the werewolf pack. Graveyard Trespasser, I see this card again making a good solid home in Standard because main deck Graveyard Hay is going to be really important. It's a 3 mana, 2 generic, 1 black, 3/3 human werewolf. Ward, discard a card. So if people want to kill this thing, they're going to 2-for-1 themselves. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. That's going to be very relevant. And then if it's a creature card, exile this way, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. When it transforms, Graveyard Glutton, same ability of Ward, discard a card. Now it's a 4/4, so a werewolf's always getting bigger on their bad side. And then whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 2 cards from a graveyard for each creature card exiled. This way, each opponent loses 1 card and gains 1 life. It is very clear on Innistrad that the werewolves are a force to be reckoned with. They are always bigger and better than their human counterparts. And this card, again, with that ward ability, and so it protects itself. It has a good solid body and solid stats, main deck Graveyard Hate, and some life gain and some life drain. Really, really solid. Definitely going to see this thing in Standard. Curse of Silence, a very cool card. Really like the art. You got this like family heirloom haunted picture who can't speak anymore. It's 1 white enchantment, aura curse, so you enchant a player. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a card name. Spells with the chosen name of the enchanted player cost 2 more to cast, and then whenever the player casts a spell with the chosen name, you may sacrifice a Curse of Silence. If you do, draw a card. This looks like a really interesting way to mess up with your opponent, to tax your opponent. You are trading 1 mana for 2 mana, and then you're not down a card with this, because when they do finally cast the spell that you've named, you get it. If you want, you can either keep it on the battlefield or you can sack it and draw a card to make sure you recouped your card. And you put 1 mana down in order to tax them for 2 mana. Presumably this is going to be in some type of an aggressive deck, or maybe you're going to have this in a sideboard against some type of combo deck to buy yourself some extra time, or just any deck. This could be very useful against any opponent's deck, just to tax their resources and be trading up on mana. A very tempo-oriented card, and a very cool card that I think could see some play in the right shell. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Tune in tomorrow for another Innistrad Midnight Hunt spoiler review video. And today's metal lyrics, of course, are going to be werewolf themed. So you can throw me to the wolves, but I'll come back as the leader.